It won't surprise me if we're the only people that walk through in here. Yeah.
Every time I've been here, I don't catch them in the main lake. Every time I go to the main lake, I can. So you gotta come fish your game. And my game is actually finding a hole in the wall places. And I've done it when I have to myself. Let my keys and not blow up. When I find those little places, I catch them. I do well. Do I think it's the main fish? Absolutely not. Do I think I made $10,000 right now? Yeah.
What? Were you expecting me to go in some little hole in the wall and start blasting them? Yeah, I expected to do that too, and it didn't work out that way. And in practice, I'd found this little backwater deal, and I did pretty good. I saw enough things there that I thought I could go there in the tournament on day one and catch them. I knew I couldn't get multiple days out of it, but I would let the rest of the tournament take care of itself. I caught a fish right off the jump in practice when I got in there. Saw a 3-pounder cruising, saw another fish on a bed, caught a solid 2.5. It was garden fry. And I thought I could go in there and, scratch out a decent bag. I fished this whole canal system, and it was the only area there that I could actually get any sort of bass to bite. All these places were full of tilapia beds and gar and these hard head catfish and whatever these sucker fish are you see in aquariums. But, whenever I got in there, I stayed until about 11:30 and ultimately left out of there with 4 fish. Lost a fish or 2, but ended up leaving there with 1, 2, 2.25 pounder and 3 little knotheads. One of those I caught sight fishing on a bed. The other ones I caught just kind of blind casting around. But I knew I shouldn't die in there, so I left out of that area, walked back through, ran to my next spot, and that's where I started catching them. I knew from past trips to Okeechobee that I struggled anytime I fished a tournament and tried to make it work on the main lake. I could never find the right caliber of fish or couldn't catch any big ones while I was out there. So I spent most of my practice time fishing various canals around the lake. And instead of me fishing 5 miles of one canal, I spent a lot of time scanning around with the new Lowrance active target with the forward shooting sonar. I got a new piece of technology called a turret, maybe a right height, put it on right before I came to this event. It enabled me to actually spin the transducer around separately than the trolling motor, which enabled me to set it in one direction, run that active target on scout mode, and parallel down the bank in these canals and just truck it and cover water. And I was looking for life. Because one thing about Okeechobee is whenever there's not any sort of life around, any other fish species, there's a ton of dead water. In fact, for the size of the lake, it almost has more dead water than any lake that we go to. And so I would spend my time just going down the edge of these canals, just scanning, looking for mats where you can see fish swimming underneath the mats or spooking out, or seeing where I could see fish, swimming along the rocks. And so most of my time was spent doing that, and it enabled me to narrow down this 5-mile canal into a 1-mile section. I even had certain mats pinpointed on where I thought I could catch a fish. So whenever I ran from the bad area that I locked through over to this new spot, I spent about 3 hours of fishing before I had to go to weigh in. I ended up catching 13.5 pounds. Didn't have any big fish, just all solid fish, and probably caught like 15 to 20 keepers during that time. And that actually ended up putting me in 58th for the day. Not the greatest start, but at the same time, it had me right where I needed to be, right in the check range, with an uphill battle to climb to make a top 10. But when I come to Florida, it's usually a survival thing. You know, you come there knowing that you need a big fish every day to climb up the ladder. And if you don't get that big bite, you need to survive some way or another. And so sitting in 58th, I was happy with that after day one. I knew on day two I was going to catch them pretty good. I had the long day on day two. On day one, I had to be in at 3:15, and I wasted so much time that morning over in the lock. On day two, I had to be in at 4:45, and I knew that I could go in there. The fish were there. I was able to just buckle down, grind, pitch a Cinco around, and I was going to catch fish throughout the day. I knew that the bite was going to be better later in the day based off of what I saw in practice and the day before when I got in there at 11:30, and then caught them basically till I had to leave at 2:45. And so when I got in there, I just started slowing down and just fishing, covering water. I had a 2-mile stretch basically that I knew I could grind down, cast a Cinco around, take my time, where I thought would be the optimal cast. I could spend longer on that. There was not a boat around, and I could just grind. As you can see in the video, I was skipping a Cinco, with the spinning rod up along these penny wart mats and hyacinth mats. And it seemed like I would get all the bites between right at the rocks where they started to about, 3-4 feet off the rocks. Beyond that, I wouldn't get a bite. And so I had it dialed in pretty good. In practice, it was the same thing. I'd go through and throw a chatterbait and a swim jig, and I'd punch mats some and do different things in there. But it seems like the easiest way to get bit was by using finesse type stuff. I was using a Yamamoto Cinco, a black and blue one, with a 1/0 Gamakatsu G finesse split shot drop shot hook, throwing it all on a Daiwa ballistic reel, spooled up with 15-pound Seaguar Smackdown braid, yellow braid, so I could see it when I get a bite. A lot of times you'd see your line jump or you'd see it move off. Throwing a 10-pound Tatsu leader. And I was using a Dobbins 703 Fury rod. And that whole setup enabled me to get more bites. Now, the reason I'm talking about all that is at one point in the day, it got tough. About 10 o'clock, I'd caught about 14 keepers at that point in time. And I knew the good part of the day was still to come. And I had, a long ways I could go down each side of that canal just fishing. And I knew I was going to catch them later on in the day. At this point, I had a 4-pounder, I had the 2.5 plus, and I had 3 little knotheads. And I went from about 10 o'clock until 4:20 when I had to leave, and only got 3 more bites the rest of the day, which was a lot different than the day before whenever I got in there at 11:30, 12 o'clock and had all those bites in the middle of the day. I don't know what changed. But this is the best tip I can give somebody in that scenario. You know, you might sit there and think, well, you need to throw an audible, you need to do something different. The thing is, this is all I had. I didn't have other areas, and I'm sure you've heard from other guys say, I had this one little wad of fish, and that was it. It's all or nothing whenever you find these pockets of fish because of all the dead water. And you'd sit there and think, well, why don't you mix it up, change colors, you know, throw a different bait at that point. Well, I'd thrown so many baits in there. And the best tip I can give somebody is just because you own baits doesn't mean it's the best thing and optimum thing to throw. If things had gotten tough and I'd been throwing a chatterbait or a swim jig, I would have then flipped over and gone over to skipping that Senko around to get bites. You know, or you'd say, well, you can go flip mats. And I did punch mats a little bit whenever it got tougher, trying to think, well, those fish might have moved underneath those mats later on in the day. And it couldn't get bit doing that. So it still became a numbers game. How many casts can you put with the highest percentage bait you have and the highest percentage spot to get bites? You know, I'd slow down, I'd speed up, cover water. But when you have it dialed in exactly where the bite's going to be at, it makes it pretty easy just to cover water then, not waste time on the in-between, and just put it in the highest percentage place you can. Ultimately, I culled one more time with those 3 bites with almost a 2-pounder, you know, to get rid of 1.5 pound fish, and it gave me 11.5 for the day. You know, it ended up dropping me down to 66, which was still good enough for a $5,000 check, but I ended up being 5 ounces short of a $10,000 check. So we survived Florida, still beat over half the field for points towards Angler of the Year and qualifying for the championship in August. I always say you can't make up points in the summer that you could have had back in February. So as a whole, you know, it was kind of bittersweet, still getting paid, still getting good points, but we survived Florida and came home to some nasty weather. So we're running a little bit behind editing, putting out videos. Wi-Fi is going in and out, power is going in and out with the snow and ice that we've had. Wishing we were back in the 85-degree Florida temperatures, but ready to get my new boat rigged up, ready to get everything ready to go for Smith Lake. That'll be the next event, and look forward to putting out a few more videos between now and then. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe and follow along. And if you got any questions, fire them out. I've got plenty of time with the weather being bad to answer everything you got. All right, thanks for watching.